I told you we were going to get lost!
It was your idea to come here in the first place!
Guys, I thought I heard something!
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for another episode of the Blood on the Lens podcast brought to you from Dark Frame AI. I'm your host, Sean Miller, and I'm joined with the co-host, Carlos Cisneros, and we have a very special guest that we're excited to talk to today. This is our guest, Michelle Gold, who is a film editor and has worked on such properties as Twin Peaks. So we're really excited to talk to her about how AI is playing a role in impacting film editing and hear what advice she's got for upcoming filmmakers as well. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us.
Sure. Nice to see you guys.
Yeah, so you've got quite the catalog of experience as far as covers a pretty big spectrum of horror and action and big theatrical releases and stuff like that. Do you find that you have to change your approach or what is your process like when you're working on stuff that's just so drastically different?
I think it depends on the medium, I guess, kind of. I worked on Curb Your Enthusiasm, for instance, and I don't know how much you know about the way that show kind of works process-wise, but it's basically you get almost like a small book style script, and each scene is basically like a book style paragraph that kind of explains what's going on. And that's basically what you have to work from when you get the footage. So you don't have a script, like a proper script in the way that you do on most jobs, you don't have a line script to follow in the same way. Like they do one, but it's you know what the beats are going to be. They're that show in particular, they don't they're pretty good, more so than I've heard with some other films that I have of directors that I haven't necessarily worked on. That when it comes to the improv in particular on Curb, it's in a good way, not in a scary way or anything. They kept that show on a really tight leash in regards to the improv. Um, they again, everybody, it was one of the maybe because Larry was so established and all that. It's one of the sets where everybody was so psyched to be there. I was on season 9, which was the season that was after they had taken a 5-year break. It was kind of really big set pieces that season where they did the corresponding show with Lin-Manuel Miranda, and they went to New York and they had a whole musical inside of the show, that was on Broadway, that we actually shot here in LA. But that one, you would get, I'd get, I don't know however many hours of footage, and I'd end up just I'd watch it down all at high speed to make sure I didn't miss anything, because I didn't really have anything to technically follow outside of the layout of how the scene was going to go. And so that one in particular is a little weird. Normally you would just kind of go through and, you get your footage and you're checking it against your line script, and you're, looking at the takes for each line delivery, each beat, all of that kind of stuff. And, but Curb worked differently just because of that. You had to sort of be in a good way. You had to kind of be a little more on top of everything at once, in a sense. Cause you didn't want to miss stuff either. You hear about
that sounds like a oh sorry.
oh,
Um
no.
that sounds like a really interesting way to edit, to have kind of a book form. So was it kind of prose, for lack of a better word, or was it just kind of scene description and you kind
It
of
was
had
a
to
scene description. Yeah, it was more here. I mean, it really was if you were to take a paragraph per scene kind of thing. It's
Mm,
Larry goes here and he runs into this person, and they would lay out whatever the beats had to be. There was this one episode in particular that I feel like it was episode 4 of that season, where they get into this whole thing about it's him and Jeff Garlin and Susie, and they got into this whole thing about this is not such a thing now, but for quite a while, the Barney's warehouse sale was like a big event here that went on at the Santa Monica airport, and like they did this whole bit like surrounding how like Jeff was technically having an affair, but in reality, like they were trying to convince Susie that he'd gotten this nice new suit that he was wearing because he had gone to like the Barney's warehouse sale. And I remember, there's like this whole thing about the Barney's warehouse sale, but like I remember watching it and like watching down the takes. Like the other thing that people I think didn't realize so much when it came to Larry David is like he is a lot less kind of serious. I mean, I guess you could surmise that, but like it doesn't take that much to get him bursting out laughing. So I mean, like, you wouldn't necessarily like see that on the show, but like he'll in what seemed to, and I don't, like purport to like speak for Larry David, but like one of the things that you would kind of see was like he'd be trying not to laugh, but he was like, I remember specifically with this Barney's warehouse sale thing, like he got through a few takes on it, and then he just started bursting out laughing. He's like, "This is so stupid, I can't help it." It's like, just like the whole subject matter. He's like, it's just so stupid, and then like basically from there, I mean, we got everything and stuff, but like from that point on, I remember like that whole thing just became like a race for them to try to not almost like devolve into laughter just because
Yeah.
like he was so amused by the whole thing that like then they all just kind of started laughing.
That you had to be like really familiar with the style of comedy in order to be an effective editor to make sure that those jokes land appropriately, right? Like you're pretty
Yeah.
much involved in making sure that a lot of those jokes really hit the way they're intended to, I imagine.
So I was an assistant editor on Curb, and so the two editors that I supported on that one was a guy named Steve Rash and a guy named John Korn, and both of them had been working with Curb since the beginning. So they really John had been on and off of it. John came on to for a little bit to help out on some comedy beat stuff with which is how we met each other and got to know one another, and then I went on to do Curb after I'd finished. But those guys just I think Steve especially, I mean, not that John doesn't, but like Steve worked on like almost every season of Curb, I want to say, if not every single season. I don't think there was one that Steve missed. um and then John worked on like a lot of the key seasons. So and he would kind of go back and forth on that and other stuff, and I think they had such an inherent understanding of how Larry works that it would like, especially again, not that John doesn't, but with Steve, it was like I believe Steve's gone on to do this new. There's like a Western comedy thing that I think he has coming out on HBO very soon. Pretty sure Steve went on to do that. Like he just inherently understands his comedy like insanely well. And I think that's a big part of it. I don't think it's that hard to get like I don't think it's like implausible to understand it though at the same time. Like it's
Mhm.
again, he would keep things like really structured. Like I've heard about other directors that like they'll just let the camera run and they'll let people like jaw away for like an hour, 2 hours, and then like maybe you find like a 30-second something in there that's like okay, which I mean that's fine. Like I feel like that's a way to work. I don't think it's a very efficient way to work. And personally, I'm not convinced that you really find such great stuff like with that method. I think it more wastes people's time a lot of the time. But that's just me, and I haven't again worked on one where it's like that loose. So what do I know? In some respects,
Well,
too.
I have a couple questions to branch off of that, but I've been doing a lot of talking. Carlos, did you have anything that you want to interject at this point?
No, so I think to Sean's point, editing and comedy must be, a little different. But it's interesting that even though it was improv, like they wouldn't let it go for too long. It makes sense that
Yeah.
like if they did, it would be like hours of footage that you're not even going to use at all. So I could see that being a waste of time for a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah, like if it wasn't, I mean, I never like saw an example of them saying like, no, let's stop, we're gonna go here. I'm sure it probably happened, like just not necessarily on camera. But I always was under the sense that like, and just from, watching, I forget how many episodes we did. We did at least 10 though. And, from watching that process, like, because you learn so much just like by watching dailies a lot of the time, like between like the directions being given, watching how people are interacting, like you really just, if you pay attention, you can learn a lot. So with him, yeah, I always got the impression that like if it started to veer a little too far away from like getting the beats they needed in order to progress the story that was sort of pre-decided on, that like they would kind of like call cut or kind of redirect or something like that. But also again, like going back to the people were like so happy to work on Curb. Like people really wanted to work on Curb. So like the people that were working on it, like the guest stars and stuff. So they were all like very much like there to play,
Right.
and whatever like Larry kind of preferred. I mean, it's at that time, Jeff, it's terrible that I can't remember Jeff's last name. He's like Larry's main showrunner guy. He also he created The League, which is like a pretty popular series on FX for a while. But he was like kind of functioning as Larry's showrunner. He'd been like one of his main writers for a long time, and he kind of would keep things. They just had like a whole system where they'd really like kind of, I think, keep things somewhat like tight. Basically, I think Jeff would have gotten a little looser if that was an option, but I think Larry, he had been like so sort of like, he had a certain way he did things, again, not in like a tyranty way or anything even remotely like that, but like he had a certain way he did things, I think dating back to like how Seinfeld developed, and I think they sort of carry that through on Curb.
It's pretty fascinating to think about the behind the scenes when you're editing and kind of helping tell the story. When you are given a batch of work, do you prefer having like working with a director that gives you a lot of coverage, or do you like it when it's all nice and kind of buttoned up, nice and neat, and there's more limitations for you? Does it make your job easier or harder in either of
Yeah, it
those?
does make it. I feel like it makes it a little easier. I mean, it's good if you're a director to have a point of view. That doesn't mean don't do coverage, but I think especially, as digital kind of became the prominent medium, I mean, nobody really shoots on film anymore except for a couple of people. You also introduce the opportunity to kind of just shoot and shoot and shoot. And I feel like if you're going to do that, that's fine. But I think like you should have a plan. And I think that what happens sometimes on every level is that you get directors who might argue that it's part of their process. I'm going to get a little skeptical sometimes with this, but you'll find that there are directors who will shoot for coverage because they want coverage for later. In some cases, you have to. I mean, you're dealing like, especially on a feature studio based or whatever, like, I mean, it doesn't have to be even studio based for this, but you're often dealing with like rewrites. I mean, on a major studio movie, you get like new versions of the script almost daily sometimes, that have like rewrites in place and stuff like that. So it's like there's a lot to kind of wrangle, and so I can understand where like if something just kind of came on the table and like you're shooting that day and you haven't necessarily had a chance to like go through your normal process, which does happen sometimes, like you have to shoot for coverage. But I think you get a better result if you have it planned out as much as possible. I think people
I would imagine so.
Yeah, like I think people who lead, and it's interesting because it's something I've been coming up against with AI dailies as well, where like I did something that was like one of my own projects recently, and like I way over generated. And to be honest, like because I did that, I treated it like dailies in a way, and like because I did that, I was like I like made it harder on myself because like suddenly I had two kind of things going on. One, there was actually like a time frame limit on the actual output of what the sort of final version was supposed to be, and I had kind of overdone it with that. So like I wasn't even going to be able to like fit what I had generated, like not everything I had generated by any means, but like that even what I had sort of initially planned as the story into that time frame. So I like spend a lot of extra money like on credits for no reason in a sense. And I also gave myself a lot of extra material that I had, like I ended up like kind of wasting time. I felt like trying to figure out if I could like sandwich it in places. And I ultimately ended up like leaving a lot of it on the cutting room floor, essentially. Which I think when you're shooting on set and like then you're dealing with that, that's one thing. But like I think especially that's a whole thing for people, especially as you're getting into longer form stuff, like to start wrestling with. Like I don't think you need to treat generating AI dailies the way you treat shooting regular on-set dailies exactly in terms of options. Like you have the option to sort of you also have the option of like to make it later, so like there's that, which obviously like isn't quite the same thing when you're dealing with only on set. And now, I don't know where all of this is going to ultimately shake out with likeness. I know it's sort of starting to be like addressed more and more, but like I will say it is convenient to be able to generate a shot or generate an angle or something that maybe you didn't get on set. I did a short film not too long ago that not horror. Nothing we've talked about so far has been horror. I just realized, but
That's all right. We should get to that.
But it was the short itself is kind of, the director is a real big Tarantino fan. He's a little younger, and he it's definitely like a sort of Tarantino homage kind of thing. And so we have a shootout towards the very end of it. So most of it was live action, but our visual effects on set, like they weren't great, I guess, for like lack of a better way of describing it. Like we did these like squibs that were supposed to be like air pressure deploy, and like they just weren't. They were just kind of a fail, to be honest. No offense to anybody that was dealing with it, and I hope if anybody watches it that was involved with it that they don't take it personally. I don't think they will, but our effects were not great. They were slow. They looked kind of fake. They were coming out because they were this air deploy thing. They were coming out of like the back of the person's neck, but nowhere else really. And like it was supposed to have been a gunshot that entered through, the front end of like under the chin.
Right.
So we had like all these kind of things that like you can obviously deal with all of those things in regular visual effects. And like to some degree we did. I used Resolve/Fusion for like muzzle flashes and stuff like that because it was just like pretty easy to knock out. That's the other thing too. Like I think people don't always think about the fact that I think if you're like already working with it all, you kind of have a better sense of it. But like sometimes traditional VFX is still like a better way to go on certain things. Like sometimes like the AI isn't necessarily the answer. And
So
a lot of the
was
times
AI was used, and that's what caused the effects to look poor, or they were
our onset. No, it was these air
got
pressure
it. Okay, got
squib
it.
deploys that didn't work. No, it was not AI at all.
So as an editor, like, what do you would there have been pushback if you were like, hey, I could probably generate this shot for you the way you see it in your head, where the effects are not going to look as cheesy. I could do it in C dance or something like that. Like, are we at that point where directors are kind of more open to that idea?
I feel like it's dependent on the director.
Right.
My director was totally fine with it. He's an old friend of mine. I have more experience than he does overall with like professional films, and so with that particular relationship, if I suggest something, most of the time, he's down to at least like try it out. And we all knew. You just had to look at the footage to see that like the effects like weren't really working. There was a number of things. Like one was that, like I described, the deployment of them like wasn't great. Another was that they didn't even get a shot that we really needed and for story purposes. So like I had to like create, and again, like I could do this in Resolve, or Adobe or whatever, but I had pretty good luck with doing it in AI, and that was much faster for a better result. So like I was going to do
Right.
it that way, especially I wasn't under, this was not like a union short film or anything like that. Now where there was pushback to some degree, but it just didn't really matter, was apparently like one of the actors had made a pretty big proclamation on set about like not using AI, and like
Wow. Proclamation,
well,
huh?
yeah, but I was kind of like, well, that's fine and all, but like you guys have like no budget really. So I mean, it wasn't no
Yeah.
budget, but I mean, most of the budget had gone to on set, whatever they did on set. So like, um, so I was like, that's all well and fine that you have this person totally uninvolved with the movie post acting in it, to like make that kind of statement. And they weren't like trying to put any pressure on me with it either. But I was kind of like, you can either have me do this for you, at really like no extra cost, and it'll look way better, or we can try to stick with these visual effects that don't look very good, are missing something story-wise, to be honest, like in terms of context or cohesion. And I mean, just wouldn't, it literally, and especially since I'm working with it a lot, like it just made no sense to like sort of take that kind of a stance. So we did.
Yeah.
If that person were to come back and try to start with that again, I think they would probably just be like, sorry, but you're not paying for visual effects work, so I don't know what to tell you.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And we were really happy with how it came out. I have things are changing constantly if you're working with AI, and especially if you're working with it in the horror space. Like you're probably more aware than some about like which models will let you push the gore and like creative language to get around it. Like there's a lot of that. So like I find that this changes a lot, but until fairly recently, I had most of my luck using like wand models in fall.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And now they let me, I found I was able to sometimes even just like use blood, whereas like some models I had to use like crimson liquid and like
that's one of my favorites. The crimson paint.
Exactly. Like
crimson paint.
Crimson liquid is usually the unlock, like in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
But I mean, I like to, one of my stress tests on models is to see if they'll decapitate something. So
have you got it?
That's a solid test.
I mean, well, that's the thing, is like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I learned it from watching, I feel like it was a Rory Flynn interview, if you know who Rory Flynn is. He has a stress test that I thought was also a great stress test, which is not decapitating, but it's a girl dancing in a room full of mirrors. And I was like, wow, that's like a really good way to see if that model works well. But I was like, now I'll just go for decapitation.
Nice. Yeah, I do the mirror. I love testing reflective stuff or symmetrical stuff, but the mirror thing is genius. Got to try that.
It's such a great way to tell like so quickly, I feel like, if it's going to be like, like what that model can do and how, and what it can process. Like it was very smart kind of test. I don't know if my test is as smart. It's more limit pushing than anything else. But
no, I imagine you have some pretty interesting prompts compared to like just anybody else doing this type of work. We all kind of develop our own workflow and workarounds and stuff like that. And it's I became really fascinated with the editing process from working on this film that Carlos and I were working on, because it felt like working on a really, really elaborate puzzle to try and use descriptive language while also tiptoeing around filters. And it was just like the ultimate creative challenge. It was extremely
Were you guys
frustrating.
using consumer models? Like you guys didn't have any kind of like backdoor access to anything that was less limited or anything like that?
So I use FAL. We use FAL for dark frame essentially, exclusively. I am able to turn some of the filters off, but WAN isn't. I have difficulty with movement sometimes. But I would say we had the most difficulty with Sea Dance. It was just a nightmare.
Oh yeah. No, same.
It's horrible.
I'm not going to say it's horrible, but it's interesting
Yeah.
because I'm curious what are the parameters on some people's versions that they're using. Because I have some people who were like, CDance has solved everything, and that has not necessarily been my experience with CDance.
That was a suspicion that Carlos and I had probably about the second or third day that we were into it, where I was like, I can play with CDance on dark frame or open art and I'm not getting any problems. And then when I'm using it on Runway, it's extremely touchy.
Yeah.
And I'd never really thought about like they must have something that we're not aware of that kind of places some filter or something there.
There is. I know this because there's a company that I'm working with on something that's been whitelisted, and like they have the option of taking like the parameters off. So it is definitely, there is to some degree, if you're not working with someone who sort of has a different kind of agreement in place. Because I work in both types of versions. But
how much better is it to have all the filters removed?
I'll be honest with you, I haven't pushed it as much as I should to this point, because I've been working on something else that like it's sort of been like in the queue, but like I'm about to do something where it's going to be pretty heavy duty as far as like gore goes, plus there's a song I'm going to put in there that is pretty divisive potentially, like that's not me, might pipe in with more information like from Machine Cinema or something like that. But I believe you can either, like, my understanding was, if you're going to be shooting where it's going to be like compositing like a real person, and you're still going to use that person as your character and stuff like that, you're not going to be like doing a style transfer of that person or something like that, you could, doing it like on a green screen is still kind of the way to go, apparently. But if you're doing it where you're going to be transferring everything into like some kind of AI environment, basically, like say you want to make it anime ultimately, just as an example or something like that, it seems like there's two different ways of doing this. One is like, there's some people who I think are just shooting on a gray backdrop and then implementing like a dimensional space into the background after the fact, basically. And then
I've heard of that.
There's also so then there's also the version where people are actually setting up like a dimensional box kind of space that has like the equivalent of a room that's basically like a light gray, often with tracking points and stuff like that, and they're working in that kind of space. And I believe that's this Satoshi Doug Liman movie that people have been sort of using as the example for what's being shot as Gray Box right now. But I have not executed.
Gray Box is specifically when it comes to using AI to do what you would typically do with a green screen. Is that what I'm understanding?
It seems to be. The only part where that's a little different is like, I think it's still recommended to use green if you're going to be, like I said, using that actual person as your character, over using gray. That's just from the conversations I've been involved in. So I can't, again, I haven't put it into practice myself. So I can only kind of like comment on it from like what I've seen, been told, like seen demos of.
That's interesting. So like, theoretically, you're kind of treating that person or thing that's in that gray environment as its own separate layer. I come from an illustration background, so I kind of think in terms of layers and Photoshop files and moving things around on a 2D space. And I tried something kind of similar where I would go in and remove the person that I needed from the scene in Photoshop and then bring that back into CDance with a reference image or two of the background to kind of give it some idea of the 3D space. So I know that's not the same thing, but I'm grasping it that it's kind of similar in some sort of the principles. It's a much more sophisticated way of doing it.
Yeah, it all kind of works similarly, like that's the thing. It's like none of these are like brand new concepts that you weren't already using, and like a lot of artists I think are really afraid of being sued for like using somebody else's likeness or character likeness or like anything like that. And there's some people like Artem from CopySite AI like that are kind of definitely delving into that now, but it's still like a really kind of young industry. And I mean, the reality is I haven't, and I have my own feelings about these guys anyway, but like I haven't seen it addressed by like anybody that was like a clearances guru as of yet, like Donaldson Califf or something like that. And I think that once that gets resolved, like that indemnification issue, you're going to see a lot more of it. But I do think that right now studios are kind of like hesitant, or if they do, it's like I had been interviewing for something. I don't know if it went away or if what's happening with it, but it was something where they were going to be using only these certain models, like in a kind of like closed loop environment that they'd have set up basically so that like it was only using these models, only using these elements. My guess is only because it wanted no reference material to get put into the ecosystem, but also so that like nothing would be cross-contaminating, that somebody else could claim, I imagine. I
That
think
makes
you'll
sense.
see a lot of that. I mean, because
Right.
it's not, out of all of the industries right now, like this is the one it's most successful in. And I mean, people can say no all they want, but they don't really like know the big picture, I think. And like where I am, especially from having worked with AI, like I'm really skeptical of these companies that are like firing their workforces and stuff like that. Because my
Right.
experience is that like AI needs a ton of guidance still. I mean, even
Absolutely.
now.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
like,
Yep.
so I mean, I get how that works in a movie environment, in an entertainment environment, but like I don't understand how these people that like have like healthcare like companies are firing workforces right now, given what I've dealt with in terms of coaching it through a movie project, which like, you know, in the industry, everybody acts like everything is brain surgery all the time and it's that level of importance, but it's not, and so we have the flexibility specifically in this part of the industry to like we have a little bit more kind of leeway, in some respects with like utilizing it and working with it, but it's pushing forward like it's definitely pushing forward, in our industry. It's not
Yeah,
like
definitely.
it's not backing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've had this conversation a lot with different people, filmmakers, also engineers. It's interesting to think where exactly we're going to be like 6 months or a year. It's changing so fast. But with your experience, right, in with your experience with these evolutions, like where do you see the industry, I guess, in a year, 2 years, five? Is there any sort of, are you seeing any sort of signal, or do you have a temperature gauge when it comes to that?
I mean, I really think it's direct to audience. Whether the
Yeah. Okay.
studios help
Yeah.
facilitate that, it's fine. Like, they're not going to give up that, but like, and we had this whole discussion obviously on the WhatsApp group on machine cinema to some degree, but like, I think that audience loyalty is going to be a huge factor in a lot of this stuff. And that, people want to like take Markiplier. Like, I feel like that's the very best example.
Mhm.
he his whole audience came from him, like his love from their whole parasocial kind of relationship with him, their whole parasocial relationship as a group. you know Most of these people specifically that made a point to go see Iron Lung were likely people who had gone through the Twitch stream with him, and I mean, I know that for him, I didn't watch his Twitch stream of Iron Lung, but like I know that it was like a seminal like series of Twitch streams, right? Like, I mean, he loved it. He loved the movie. It's why he optioned it. It's why he made it. So his audience was with him. Same thing. You don't necessarily have that ecosystem in place on like a studio movie. The closest thing you're seeing right now with it is probably, Obsession in Backrooms, where again, you
Right.
have these two
Right.
guys who have like these audience backrooms, especially. I mean, backrooms is so interesting because I feel like people who don't know much about it have no clue of like the massive like ecosystem
Right.
behind backrooms and how it's very audience like created and supported, right? So like,
The audience,
know,
they were part of the story in a sense, right? Yeah.
and also, but also like,
But I think that's what's kind of cool about where we're at now, especially with things that are being picked up off of like YouTube or whatever, is
Right.
it kind of allows a lot more collaboration from the audience as far as their imagination being projected onto whatever that is. And I think it's easier for an IP like Backrooms, which is just a space, it's kind of open to interpretation of what it is. But I kind of, I don't know if you agree with this. Carlos and I talk about this quite a bit. I kind of think we're going to see a boom of independent creators now that the barrier to entry to show your idea is so much lower. Now you can present your idea to look like a multi-million-dollar production, so I think there's, I don't know, it's hard to predict, but it is a really interesting period creatively that we're all in at the moment while people are figuring out how to adopt these into like traditional workflows like you were mentioning.
Yeah.
No, I think the biggest thing you're going to come up again. Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah, just just a small comment. I've read how actors, some actors, actresses even, are considering that they want to write and direct themselves, right? But they're considering going straight to YouTube because cutting out the middleman, the studio, which would really influence their creative vision, which ends up being like watered down, right? I think there's a lot of interest in that, in having creative freedom, right? So I am seeing kind of whisperings of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to me, if I was making stuff now, like if I was a filmmaker or actor or whatever, I would 100% put everything on YouTube that's viable to put on YouTube. Or, if it's something where like content, the nature of the content becomes a bit of an issue, find something like you guys and put it on there, like if it's one of the, I don't know, I'm not sure what's going on with YouTube exactly with restrictions right now. It seems like this is an ever-changing kind of thing with like
It feels like
what will get
they've
kicked
lifted
or
some of them.
No, I've seen some pretty graphic. Yeah, I've seen some pretty graphic stuff, and there's nudity. Seem lax.
Well,
seem relaxed though.
Yeah, it's so weird what you see on different things. Like I forget, like I think on like Substack, I ended up subscribing to someone who mostly does like a lot of like nude AI kind of stuff. I didn't realize I was at the time, but it's funny because most of my Substack is like fairly political stuff. But then all of a sudden, like that will come up in like that Substack stream of like, and it's very clearly like that, like, so it's kind of funny. I don't know, like, but it's funny like what gets through and what doesn't. And I know there's a whole thing going on with like gaming with like Australia, for instance. I don't know if you followed any of that that's going on. There's like all this censorship going on with Australia, and then like there's games but I remember with this Dexter game, like Dexter, like the very first like scene was like the beat or whatever was Dexter like not only just tracking down a guy who was like a murderer, but he was like the children's choir teacher, and he was like digging a hole to like bury a dead kid, and I was like, that's how they came out of the gate, I guess.
That's intense. It does bring up the subject of censorship, which is at the center of a lot of horror, or a lot of horror directors. Not necessarily horror. Violence in general in film has always had opposition. I mean, I was watching a clip of Hitchcock. He was always asked the violence question. Why all the violence? Orson Welles, same thing. Why all the violence? He had some and then Quentin Tarantino, why all the violence? Is just always, there's always that pushback. And I think that with AI we're seeing a little bit too, but there's this R-rated territory. I think at least on our platform, we're trying to, in a way, we're almost trying to facilitate that sort of we're trying to push the boundaries a little bit, because you can't have film without violence, you can't have film without R-rated content, right? So
Not to mention,
we have yet to see that. Yeah.
I mean, it's not my favorite go-to kind of thing, but like you can't deny like how popular these Terrifier movies are.
Oh yeah,
You
the third one
know?
was insane. It was,
I mean, those
and I think
movies
it
are
did well.
basically
It
just
did,
like evisceration movies. Like,
yeah, it goes far beyond your decapitation tests.
yeah.
Even it just progressively gets even more gory, which you think, okay, how much worse can it get? And then it just keeps on getting. And it's very popular, right? The audience loves it, and the
And then
audience
that becomes
dictates.
the game, though, too, is how much
Yeah.
harder can you push it, right? Like, I mean, you have to be able to outdo yourself. So, like, there's that as well, and that's been a thing forever. I mean, having done Final Destination, I can 100% attest to how that kind of system works.
Yes. Which one did he do, by the way? I know. Well, there's his latest one, which is pretty good, but there's like 10 of them at this point.
Probably always be my favorite movie. I feel like just because of the nature of when it came out and all that. Is Danny Boyle's Train Spotting. It's nothing beats it for me.
That's an intense movie.
I was a rave kid, and like just everything about that movie, like it was just it was part of the whole like kind of 90s Sundance indie. I mean, it came out in England first, but like I always kind of look at Train Spotting in the same kind of like, because it's the same kind of 5-year period that like Pulp Fiction came out and Clerks came out, and trying to think, there's like at least 2 others that I'm not thinking of that sort of lived. Boogie Nights came out not that long after, like they all sort of had like a certain like era to them. So yeah, I feel like it's been my favorite for this long that I don't think that will change.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool.
But I think as far as like to me, like that movie is like, I mean, I think Danny Boyle to me is like probably my favorite director. I think he's like one of the greatest directors working. I think you have to give a lot of credit to directors that have a million different genres in their repertoire, because like you have like a lot of directors who kind of stay focused on certain types of films, even if it's like spanning, I mean, I'm not trying to discount anybody else, but like you have certain directors who, like Spielberg just came out with Disclosure Day, and there's a couple other kind of things that he like kind of tends to stay focused on, but his movies tend to have like a few kind of specific angles, I feel like most of the time.
Right.
With a few exceptions.
So it's like, here we go again with the UFOs.
Yeah, I was not.
I know. I love aliens and UFOs.
I can't say anything.
No, I got you. I mean, I actually love UFOs and aliens, so fine by me. But I understand what you're saying, right? It's like a very specific niche almost, or style that they focus on, and then there's no branching out completely.
I mean, you could even argue, and like again, this is. I don't want to discount these directors because it's like because I don't mean to when I say this, but it's like even Scorsese, it's like Monks or Crime, kind of, right? Like his stuff is kind of like religious monk kind of related. He has like 3 movies, I think, that are like that, and then otherwise it's kind of crime in different forms. You have Casinos, you have Goodfellas, you have Wolf of Wall Street. I mean, they have a certain vibe to them depending on which end of it you go, or I guess Passion of the Christ falls maybe more in line with I guess it sort of has its own like thing on it, but whereas like Danny Boyle, he's done everything. Like, I mean,
right.
The only thing I don't think he's done is like a very, very traditional love story, but you could argue like A Life Less Ordinary is kind of a love story, and but like he's done like Millions, like there's just stuff like and then obviously like 28 Days Later.
Right.
I remember when he did Slumdog Millionaire, just being like so blown away by that movie and everything about it, and it was like, I mean, I think the best directors in general, like when you can take a piece of life that like isn't familiar to everybody and that people don't necessarily relate to, and then you make it both incredibly fascinating and relatable, which I felt like he kind of did with that movie. Like, I think that's a huge feat. I think it's not one that
Yeah.
gets achieved a lot of the time that well necessarily.
Absolutely. I'm salty.
No, same. I need to look up when my thing like overall renews, because I'm at the
Yeah, you
point where
should. You
like,
should.
well, is like really the last thing I'm heavily connected to Adobe with
Mm.
at this point. So it's like if I kind of get in there and like figure that out, I don't really need to be that connected to Adobe necessarily anymore. Especially now that Resolve just came out with this photo page thing, which is like basically Photoshop inside Resolve.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
anything
really
I
nice.
can do to get rid of using Adobe, I would love to. I mean, it's at this point, I just use it for Illustrator. It's kind of, with all these new tools and the advancement of like other free stuff, it's just kind of like, why am I paying this much money? But as far as like tools and technological limitations go, as an editor that's working on films as big as the ones you're working on, what do you feel is missing in the AI editing space as far as software workflows or anything like that goes? Because when Carlos and I were working together, the whole time we're just kind of like writing stuff down, going, dude, wouldn't it be great if it just did this? Or what if we
Yeah.
had this sort of functionality? What kind of stuff are you using, or where are you running into like the limitations of the technology to allow you to do what you do as an editor?
I mean, I feel like the biggest thing is the thing that sort of everybody's up against, which is that like you're constantly having to kind of jump between programs right now for various things. I know the guys over at this one company, Conductor, and they're them, and I know there's other people, and I think even Adobe is, because I think I just got invited to be like part of the partner program on this thing. Maybe I forget. I have to look at the thing they sent me, but I know there are a number of companies that are trying to create something that basically allows you to bring everything into the timeline. With various kind of mixed amounts of success. Conductor like just sort of got into beta, consumer kind of level beta. So I haven't even really like tried it out yet. Like they're gonna get me set up on it, I think, in a week or so probably. But that's the biggest thing, and I see all the companies making moves towards addressing this. So like that part of it is good. It's like that, the naming stuff, like or just the file organization in general is kind of a disaster. I would really, really, really like them, and this seems to me it shouldn't be that hard, but I really would like them to implement where you can, on all the models, that you can choose the frame rate. Not being able to choose the frame rate is a big problem when you're dealing with like a professional show, because like you're either dealing with like a 3:2 pull down situation, like there's just like extra steps that like make it less ideal, especially like the higher quality, you have to go. The other thing that's like definitely happening, you can argue it's like various levels of success. Some people are more positive about it than others, is sort of like HDR based workflows. Because I mean, everybody finishes in 4K and everybody finishes and, like those at that level. And so like, if you really want to be able to compete, you do have to be able to sort of like be at that level as well in reality,
Right.
like
Right.
this is, those are just like non-negotiables that you're going to have to get around. I don't think any of that is going to change.
Yeah.
You're going to have people who are fine with like watching everything less fancy looking, I guess. But if you really want to be able to like play in the same sandbox as like a giant blockbuster or whatever, like you have to be able to execute on that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah. Which
Go ahead.
which platforms do you find yourself switching between, and for what functionality? Like which functionality are you using on each, and then what would it look like to bring everything together on a timeline for you, just to make it awesome?
Well, I think this is a pretty good segue to ask, like, at this point, what is it that you're excited about? What are you working on? Do you have any projects or anything that you've got cooking, like personal stuff? I'm sure with all the years of experience you have working on films and editing, you've got a really sharp eye for telling a story. So I can only imagine you've probably cooked up some of your own. And now that we have like all these tools at our fingertips, is there anything that you're working on that you're excited to share, or anything like that coming up?
Yeah, I've been mostly focused on shorts lately. I just because it's the easiest for me to execute. I haven't really, there's one that I guess you could sort of slide into microdrama that I've been developing. And if I can get that figured out, I'll continue on with that because I think it's pretty fun. It takes place in like that magazine paparazzi kind of world of like 2003. So
Oh, cool.
like it's pretty, it's like not too long ago, but it's long enough ago that you can like play on nostalgia because it's like the whole thing with nostalgia is like the way it's worked until recently. And I feel like with the way timelines are changing, with the way people pay attention to stuff, this isn't going to stay this way. But the way it's kind of been is that like nostalgia works in 30-year cycles. So whatever was like popular, like 30 years, like it doesn't quite match up exactly, but you could argue, I don't know, Pulp Fiction came out, I think in 94 or 95. Like you could argue like, so 2025 would have technically been like the 30-year nostalgia cycle to come out with like the new Pulp Fiction, not a remake or anything like that, but like,
Right.
whatever somebody's new version of like Pulp Fiction is going to be. And like, I still think that applies. So like, I don't think that necessarily has gone away, but I do think it is going to like kind of mutate and change just because like people are consuming stuff so fast now and things become vintage so much more quickly in a sense.
Well, I feel like I was about to say the younger generation. They like grunge is back. Grunge like came back, and it has been about maybe 30-ish years, right? So it is interesting how it is cyclical, as you said.
Yeah, like today.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like you're like waiting.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, like you're waiting for. Oh no, God.
No, I was just I have kids and they're all into like 90s stuff and like grunge.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And today I went because my son is like into 90s and metal and new metal, and we were at a comic shop and I bought him the first collection of Spawn comics because I was like,
oh
nice.
Wow.
It was either that or like X-Men from like Jim Lee or something like that, right? I was like, this feels very of the time that he's trying to capture. So it's kind of cool to see it all come back. I would have never expected to see my kids wearing some of the stuff that they wear.
Yeah. Has he watched the movie Spawn?
No, yeah.
Don't have him watch it. Don't have him watch it.
They just opened up a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles pizzeria down on the promenade here.
Oh shit! Really?
Yeah,
No
I think it's
I would love that. I would go.
Yeah. Well, it looks like it. Like you can see that. Like if you look it up online, there's a couple people who've done videos that have gone to visit it or whatever.
Yeah,
but it's very like 90s looking on the inside.
Yeah,
and stuff,
fun.
Fun.
Yeah. That's cool. Well, at this.
I got really busy with stuff. I did Twin Peaks and Curb all like 1 year after another. And I only had like a week off in between Twin Peaks, and both of them were like insane schedules. Like we would work like 2 weeks, get a break on the like whatever Sunday of that 2 weeks was, and then be back at it until like the studio's accounting department came to the show. And like I think they thought they were circumventing like the golden time rules and stuff like that, but it turned out like they actually weren't giving us enough time off. So like it was nice because we made a bunch of money. Like you're basically like handcuffed to the cutting room when you're on one of those movies. Like your time's not really around, and like there's only so much you can kind of try to dictate that. And at least that's how it's been. And so I was really wiped out because like our schedule was often like, if not 7-day weeks, definitely 6-day weeks. And, like they were often like 16-hour days kind of things. And, I had that week, I probably would not have taken on a job normally, like with only having like a week down, but I mean, you can't really like say no to working for David Lynch, and like I didn't know if there would ever be an opportunity
Yep.
again.
Right.
So I jumped into that, and then we were basically like at David's. Like he David. I don't know if you happen to see. I feel like I can talk about this because it's been online and it's visible now. But like
Sure. Sure.
David had 3 houses next to one another. If you looked at when they listed the houses for sale,
Mhm.
after he passed away, like you can see the whole layout. So I don't feel like weird about discussing this,
Sure.
but like,
Sure.
I had a key to the one house that was like, I called it like the film house that we worked in.
Mhm.
And like we basically lived at that. I mean, I didn't actually live there. I went home at night, but like I might as well
Yeah.
like basically lived at that house for like the better part of like the year. Cause like,
Yeah.
we were there like 6 days a week, 12-hour days, pretty much like almost every week.
Yeah, Michelle, thank you so much. This was a real treat. I really
Yep.
appreciate it.
Oh, thanks. It
Awesome.
was so great to
Yeah.
talk to you guys too. Awesome. Well,
Awesome.
thank you, you guys.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you.